absolutely thrilled and humbled to have here today a friend, a mentor, a hero of mine. I mean it. You really are. You're a powerful inspiration for me, and I think for people around the world. And part of why I wanted to create a podcast was so that I could kind of talk to my Super Friends network. And I feel like you are like one of the captains of the Avengers of this Super Friends network. Zainab Salbi, you are a force for good in the world, and I'm very, very thankful to have you as my friend. And I'm so happy you could join me today on Angry Americans.
Well, the pleasure is mine, and I want to start with there's a Native American philosophy that we are all mirrors of each other. So they are the clear mirrors where people, like when you meet them, they energize you, they bring the best in you, all of that. And they are the shady mirror, which people are like, irritates you, and they're the no mirror, people you don't pay attention even, like they exist. And the whole idea is that everyone you meet is a mirror of you. So if you like someone, it's because they're bringing the best in you. And if you don't like someone, it's because they're bringing the worst in you, right? Wow. So it's like it's putting it back on us. So anyway, all of this to say is that you are a clear mirror to me. You bring the best. And when I see you, I get energetic and excited and committed and inspired. And so not only the feeling is mutual, it's a clear mirror, brother.
Oh, thank you. I was hoping you didn't say the weird mirror or like the funhouse mirror.
Yeah,
right?
I was like, well, actually, you are really the shady mirror. Yeah. But and one of the things I did a retreat on that, and you had to confront the shady mirror people. And that's the whole idea, is that you tell someone, you're a shady mirror, you irritate me like this, and I learned this about myself. As a result.
So who would be your shady mirror? Would it be Donald Trump, or like who would be?
I think Donald Trump is a lot of he's not only my shady mirror, a lot of our shady mirrors. And so the question becomes, where's the Trump in you? In us? Like, where's the Trump in me? And where's the Trump in you or anybody else? And that's the whole idea, is what's part of him that is irritating you, and look for that part of you.
Wow. There's so many parts of him that irritate me.
Then be careful.
Like, if I had to take it all in, I'd be 500 pounds of pieces of irritation, right?
Yeah.
But part of why I wanted, and we're at the Manhattan Classic Car Club in New York City. You, in my view, Zainab, you're a very dear friend, and I consider you like extended family to me. But I think you're also one of the most powerful and important leaders, not just in America, but in the world right now.
That's very kind of you.
And you've also been on Oprah more than anybody I know, maybe more than anyone, period.
No, that's not true.
How many times have you been on Oprah?
10, and 1 on Super Soul. 10 on the show and 1 on Super Soul. But there are people who have been a lot more.
That's a lot.
Dr. Phil, for example.
Okay, so there's like Dr. Phil, and then there's
Oz,
Dr.
Susie
Oz,
Arman.
and the lady running for president, Marianne Williamson, right?
Marianne Williamson.
She's running for president.
She is,
right?
Exactly. No, so there are lots of people who've been on Oprah.
But 10 and 1, you're almost at a dozen. Do you get like a special Oprah prize when you hit 12, or when you hit 20? Do you get like a ring or some kind of an award when you hit a certain number?
No, but I tell you, I'm extremely grateful for her, because it's not only getting on her show, it is every time. I mean, when I was running Women for Women International, that's the 10 times on the show, we would raise between $2 to $5 million in 24 hours.
From one appearance?
One appearance, just because
Wow.
when she says every woman should support a woman through Women for Women International, it's like, oh my God, like we literally one time we raised $5 million in 24 hours.
Wow.
So I'm extremely grateful for her on a cause level. On a personal level, she is a personal mentor and a guide to me when I switch from the humanitarian world to the media world. And I'm like really, really, she not only mentored me, but she supported me. She gave me the first interview she has ever given to the Arab, Middle East, and Muslim world. And
really?
That was a big, big deal. And I started my interview with her with, in the name of God, the most merciful and the most gracious, in an Islamic prayer. And that was like a big deal in honoring like 1.9 billion Muslims out there. And it was like amazing. And then the last part was in her, one of her latest books. She had a quotes from different inspiring people. And this is my favorite part. She had a quote from me, and it's next to my favorite amazing guru in my opinion is Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist activist, right? I was like, oh my God, you put me next to Thich Nhat Hanh, you put me so I was like, for me, that was more exciting.
Better than being next to Dr. Phil, right?
Yeah, that Thich Nhat Hanh for me is a hero. I love him.
So for people who maybe aren't familiar with your work, I know part of the power of what you do is storytelling for others. But if someone, I wanted this show to be a platform for activists and for advocates and for voices. For folks who maybe don't know who you are or how you got to this point in your life, can you tell them what you think they should know about you?
Oi.
Where did you come from, right? Because you and I, for some people,
That's a long
are
story.
unlikely friends, but I don't think so. I think it's kind of a beautiful thing that out of war can come friendships.
Absolutely.
And
no,
we
that
never
was
would have met probably if not for
yeah.
a confluence of events. But if you can start by, the essence of where you come from and how you got to this point where now you live in New York City and you're hanging out with Oprah, that was probably unlikely at other points in your life, right?
Well, I mean, it's all where do I tell my life from and which story, and I have a memoir, and I wrote I could write 2 books and I would say, this is my life, or you can open it in the middle of the book and you say, oh, this is my life. So there are aspects of my life. But the one aspect which I assume that you were alluding to, and where a lot of people find it interesting, even though I, honest to God, did not think it's a unique story at all until the age of 35, which was a few years ago, But that started with my childhood in Iraq. I'm born and raised in Iraq. And there are a few things about it, which is my family knew Saddam Hussein. We were his friends. And that is not a choice. I always tell people it's not a choice that was theirs. Actually, the choice was his. And if we, their choice, and they often talk about this moment, because I was very angry growing up at my family, at my parents. It's why did you put us in a relationship with the dictator? I was literally, he's a dictator. It's even though I grew up calling him uncle, I wasn't oblivious that he was a dictator. And I wasn't oblivious that he killed people and raped women and all of that. So it's growing up angry at my parents. And they talk about that day, the day they the friendship started. Because they met him a couple of years earlier and they avoided him. And then there was a day in which they walked to a friend's home at night, wanting to hang out, right? This was in the 70s. There's no cell phone and you call in advance and all of that. They just walked out. Hey, let's go to so-and-so. So-and-so opens the door and tells them Saddam Hussein is in the living room. And both of them, my parents separately tell me the stories that they say they looked at each other and they had to calculate very fast. To enter the room is to be to lock the friendship, because he's been pursuing them and they've been avoiding him.
Right.
And they were scared as non-political people. My father was a commercial pilot. My mom was a teacher. So they had zero political ambition. And this is not our game thing. But to leave would be to be rude.
Right.
And piss him off. And he kills people on the most simple, benign things. If he gets pissed off, he does kill people, right? So they always talk about that moment, and what they did was the polite thing, and they entered the room, and they end up spending that whole evening with him. And then by the time they went home, he was sent them rifles, hunting rifles and machine guns and all of that hunting, and that was locked in the relationship. But that, so I was very judgmental of my parents and this until fast forward, and I'll, the Gulf War, the second Gulf War starts. And I was very much against the war because I worked overtime, and we'll talk about that later, in war zones, helping women survivors of war. So for me, it doesn't matter. I see the damage of war and I see the victims of war, and I feel like I spent 2 decades fixing the damage war creates. So I'm not for no wars. Let's solve our problems in other ways. It's just I've seen enough victims in my life, enough houses burned, enough women raped, that I don't want to see that again, right? So I was not happy about the Gulf War. And I'm in an event, in a reception, and Paul Wolfowitz was there. Remember Paul Wolfowitz?
Yeah,
that was the old
Not on my Christmas card list.
Now they look very nice and benign, actually, compared to Trump. But I mean, and I'm talking with a woman, and And he comes and he spreads his arms. It's like he knows the women and he shakes it and they're talking. And then he says, hey, I'm Paul Wolfowitz. And I remember it's like, oh my God. Like I'm put in that moment of, do I shake someone's hands that I don't agree with, or do I do the polite thing to do, and I did the polite thing to do. And so I became less angry at my parents over time as I was confronted in times between my ideology and my politeness and cultural norms and upbringing, and that's, but anyway, that shaped my life.
Right.
Knowing Saddam Hussein, I was known all over the country as the daughter of Saddam Hussein's pilot. My father became eventually his private pilot, and then my the head of civil aviation. And then I came to America, and then I grew up in war myself. So I was 10 years old when the Iran-Iraq war started. So from a very early age, I realized that what the news talk about war is from men's perspective, which is your experience of war. It's from the army. It is from tanks and soldiers and politicians and planes and all of that. And as a child in war, I was experiencing obviously a different aspect of war, which is how do you keep on going? And everyone around me was a woman. The teachers was a woman. My mom obviously was a woman. The doctors were women. The factory workers were women. And so women were running life in the midst of war, because a lot of people don't understand who are not growing up in war or they don't experience war. Life in war keeps on going. It's not that people lock their homes and they just sit and war until the war. You go to school, you get married, you get divorced, you go to birthday party. Like this keeps going, right? So I, at a very young age, literally as a child, I was like, oh my God, the news is showing only the men's side of the war. They're not showing the women's side of the war. And the women's side of the war is how do we keep life going, basically, right? And that's really informed the rest of my life, is how do we understand any issue not only from a man's perspective, but also it's not I don't believe we should ignore men's perspective. It's just we also need to add the women's perspective basically in it. So, and that includes war and peace, and I end up dedicating my life for that. And then the last but not least, I grew up with this, a lot of people now when you think about Iraq, they think victims, they think ISIS, they think women, oppressed women. That is not how I grew up with. I grew up with a feminist mother who made me read books about American civil rights movements and feminist books as a teenager, and told me that I have to be strong and independent. And now when I tell people, throughout my life in America, when I tell people I'm from Iraq, they say, oh, you must be an exceptional Iraqi. I was like, actually, every single woman in my family is stronger than me. I am not unique in my surrounding, right? It's just, this is how I grew up. And she told me you have to be strong and independent, and no man should expect you to cook or clean just because you're a woman. So it's like this very feminist mother. But the way I came to America, so this is upbringing, war, Saddam, /fear, and a strong mother, which I actually grew up seeing her try to commit suicide over and over again. So the way I came to America is I was about to turn 1920, and my mother asked me to accept an arranged marriage in here. And I'm like, what? What? You told me I am to be a feminist, strong woman. Like, arranged marriage to who? I don't know this guy. He was, I met him only once. He used to come to the States all the time, and she would cry, and she's like, please accept it. Please accept it. And my dad is like, this is just wrong. What are you doing, woman? And she's like, over my dead body, she needs to get out. And at the end, I'm the only daughter. I have two brothers. And I was very close to my mother. And Paul, I did not want to see her cry anymore. I grew up with her, especially as the relationship got stronger with Saddam or closer. I would see my mother hysterically crying, trying to commit suicide. I don't understand what's going on. Right. I cannot. She doesn't tell me, but this happy mother turns into just really struggling. I see her struggling, and crying and sobbing. And so at the end of the day, I was like, okay, just stop crying. Okay, is that what it takes? And this was June 1990. June 15 is when I entered the United States. as a bride, basically. The guy who I'm to marry welcomes me in the airport. I see him and I get anxiety first look.
What airport did you come in? What city?
It was in Chicago.
In Chicago.
And
Wow.
I see him and I'm like, I get anxiety, like, ooh, like, you either like someone
Yeah.
or you don't like them from the same look and from the first look. And anyway, I go and it's like awkward. He's 13 years older than me. Now I'm almost 50. That doesn't bother me, but I was 19,
Sure.
20. That did bother. Like he was 33.
Yeah.
That was that for whatever a stranger. And I go for it because my mom, in the wedding day, now we're in Chicago and we're driving to the wedding. I'm in my bridal, whatever, dress. And my father stops the car and says, "You've got to stop. This is wrong. This is wrong." And my mother in the highway, hysterically crying, is like, "Over my dead body, she cannot go back with me to Iraq. She will not." Long story short, I just like, okay, don't fight.
Right.
Please, I'll say yes. I'll
Wow.
handle it. I mean, like, I'm behaving just a girl, like a daughter, basically.
Right.
I say yes to the marriage, and my parents leave 2 weeks afterwards back to Iraq. That's July 1st now. August 2nd, Saddam invades Kuwait.
Right.
August 3rd, there's a blockade and a sanction on Iraq. And it was my last time to see my family until, 9 years later.
Wow.
I, on the other hand, get stuck with this, I can say it, bastard of a man, I call him shit trap, who end up being a horrible man who hated Saddam Hussein. It's okay. I did not like Saddam. I mean, I have ambivalence, whatever, all kind of mixed up feelings. Sure. We can talk about that later about Saddam. And so he violated me, and I think it's almost for him, it's almost like he got something that belonged to Saddam. And his anger would be expressed through me, And so he's a violent man, sexually violent man. And I end up escaping 3 months later. And when I escaped, whatever, it's a long story about the escape, but leaving, obviously when I grew up in Iraq, we were friends of the president.
Right.
So, and I come from a family that was, comfortable family, socioeconomically very comfortable family, right? But friends of the president meant private planes and jewelry, blah, 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 like all fancy schmancy stuff, right? The day I escaped, I have $400 in my pockets. I have 2 suitcases full of designers' clothes from my past, like expensive shit kind of thing,
Yeah.
But I have $400 in cash.
Wow.
And I escaped. And I can't call my family to tell them, what the heck have you done to me? And but then that day I vowed, I said, I will build my life from zero. I shall never tell anybody about my past in Iraq. And one day when I build my life and stand on my feet, I will go back into the region and try to help, but not today. I will build myself first. And that's how my journey started. And, we talk a lot about immigration these days and ICE and all of that. When I left these guys 3 months later, so my papers were not even complete, because, have to stay married for,
Right.
At that time was 6 months. Now you have to stay married for 2 years before you get your green card. So I just said, fuck that, I'm leaving, right? And so I go to the immigration services, basically, and I line up at 8 a.m., and I go to the woman who's in the counter, and I say, this is my paper, this is my passport, this is my return ticket to Iraq, this is my story, I don't want to be an illegal person, you tell me what to do. I'm coming to the beast's mouth, basically.
Right.
This is not who I am. You tell me what to do. I don't know what to do, And
And what did she tell you?
I wish I can. I wish I can remember her name. I remember her face. She was a black woman, petite, very thin, and had her hair all pulled back. And I don't remember her voice, actually. She said, come with me. Takes me to the second floor, make me wait for a couple of hours, and comes back and gives me my work permits and said, you need to work. You need to take care of yourself. You cannot go back to your country here. And
Wow.
I am over time, I became comfortable. I have a very conflicted relationship with the divine and God, but over time I became comfortable to say I actually really love God a lot. And for me, moments like that, I would look up and just say, okay, thank you, thank
Yeah.
you, thank
Yeah.
you. You know,
That was the
and that
moment.
was how I stayed in America, you know, and I end up, and then the rest is history, basically. I mean, well, the rest is story, but you know, that's how I end up. So when people talk about immigration now
Yeah.
and America, and I'm like, you know, that was for me what I love about America as an immigrant.
Yeah.
Extreme generosity, and that is beautiful, right? Like that woman, what she did,
And you feel like that. I'm glad. Like you're so skilled at storytelling. I don't even have to ask you any questions, but I think you probably anticipate, you know, a bit of where I want to go with this story. But what do you think of? And you think of generosity. I mean, you think of those moments that defined for you in those very early, precious, fragile moments what America was, and was it what you expected? And now, in retrospect, what has it become? That
No, I actually, honestly, when I tell people, it's like I genuinely love and respect this country, and it doesn't come out of patriotic. Like I don't necessarily. It's not coming because I grew up with the national anthem or anything like that, right? Like not patriotic duty. It comes out of genuine respect and appreciation for this country. It's from my heart, right? It's a genuine respect, and so it's not only generosity; it's freedom. And I remember until today, by the way, I've been here for 29 years now, right? So I've been in America more than I've been in my own home country, Iraq. So every time I speak my truth and just tell my truth completely, and I do, you know, I speak in the media about what my opinion is, and people are like, that's good. I was like, wow, you're okay with me saying that? And they're like, yeah. And the more I speak, the more you were like, there is an acceptance of freedom of expression and a freedom of diversity. And Paul, here's the thing. I came, no one knew who I was, right? Like nothing. 3 years later, 1993, I found an organization called Women for Women International out of zero, nada, whatever. 1995, I get awarded at the White House. At that time, it was President Clinton.
Yep.
One of 6 Americans get awarded at the White House for our work, for our humanitarian work in Bosnia. Now, this is a unique story to America, that an immigrant can move from starting from zero to being awarded at a White House ceremony for being an American who contributes to this country. And no one knows. It was irrelevant who my father was or like, you know, my past. I have since, you know, known President Clinton. It's like, did you know who I was? And it's like, it doesn't matter what you were doing, which is helping women survivors of wars. That's what the award was. And we accept you for that. So that for me is what's America. And now coming back to this moment, because these values that are most beautiful about America, and I'm telling it to you as an immigrant myself, these values are being threatened right now. And it is the generosity, and it is the freedom, and it is the welcoming and the inclusivity, and there's a way, like the assimilation and the melting pot is all accepted, and it's beautiful, right? You find your voice in here. These values are being threatened right now in America.
That's exactly why I wanted to have you on the show at this moment in time. You and I were on television recently together, talking about a variety of different things, you know, reflections on the cost of war, but it was happening in the backdrop of a point where we're teetering on the edge of war with Iran, and the president is talking about pardoning war criminals, something that I never thought our commander-in-chief would do. It's something Saddam would do, right? So at this moment in time, and I could honestly, I would love to go back in the way back machine with you and help people understand what Iraq was like in the 70s and what the real Iraqi people are like, because they're so often stereotyped. I mean, Americans think every Iraqi's running around with an RPG on their shoulder, right? And there's so much more complexity, and even the triumph or the glamour even of Baghdad in the 70s. When I got there, it was 2003, but you could feel this point probably late 70s, right? Where it was an epicenter of innovation and intellectualism, and even the way the highways were built, you could feel that at that moment, Iraq was really forward-looking and forward-leaning.
And arts and hip and dance and I mean like it's a vibrant definitely Baghdad where I'm from, but like the country, I can't speak about the whole country, but you know, obviously I'm in the city, vibrant arts, fashion, you know, innovation, all of the architecture. So this was like, that was the vibrant time, and then over time you sort of crumble and no.
Yeah, you feel like it gets paused. Right, like the evolution and the innovation, the creativity was paused. And so fast forward now to this moment in time, and I find now that I'm 15 years home from Iraq, reflecting on, you know, what I knew to be a tyrant or a despot or you know, authoritarian regime, and seeing the after effects of that, and now seeing this moment in time where, bluntly, I think everybody can agree, regardless of their background politically, that this president is echoing and reflecting, to use your mirror point from the beginning, some of those ghosts, right? Some of those spirits. And so at this moment in time, you and I have had conversations over dinner, at your home, and over the years. What is the most salient point? And maybe that pivots me to my question that I ask all of my guests. Zainab, what makes you angry?
What's making me angry these days is that what I actually just talked about, it's not only about America. These values there was a lot of work to talk about these values and to make them universal values of democracy, of human rights, of freedom of press, of women's rights, all of these things. And a lot was spent and effort and all of that to actually make them universal values that people around the world then bought into it and are fighting for it and have fought for it. So what's making me angry right now, honestly, is that these values are getting compromised right now and at risk of losing. And so I want to like scream and say, it's not only him, it's not only Trump, is we need to fight for the values, because the loss of it is not loss of American values. It becomes a loss, it becomes a betrayal. You know, for every person out there in the world who bought into it and fought for it. Do you see what I mean? It becomes saying, oh no, we really didn't mean it. You know, when it's like, you know, no, we just meant it when it comes like to just talking about it. And it's like, for me, I know these people who have risked their lives on the front lines and confronting different regimes and different, you know, oppression, to talk about these values. And now I see them in front of me, being challenged, well, they're not crumbled yet, but it's in a fight. But that's what makes me want to scream, actually.
You've been to over 100 countries. I know you've probably been all over the world, right? I mean, more places than almost anybody I know. And you've been to war zones. You've been into some of the toughest places on the planet. You've seen the worst that humanity has, and at the same time you've been this clarion voice of light and hope and the future. Zainab, how bad is it here now in your view? This moment in time, this show in part is a distress call, I think, from America to America, a reflection to itself about this, what I think is very fragile and important moment in time. But when you look with your perspective, you know, how bad is this moment right now?
It's a dangerous moment. You know, how bad it's a moment. When a lot of people ask me, is this like Saddam Hussein? I was like, it's not like Saddam, because Saddam is a dictator. He came to our power because he assassinated the president and then pushed the other president on the side, you know? So like, that's not. It does remind me of what situation right now of what's happened in Turkey with President Erdogan, for example, 13 years ago, with a lot of presidents, actually, some of them I don't want to name, around the world, who come through a democratic process, right? They come through an election and they say, we are here to do this and this. And so people get, you know, they get like, they don't like the president, all of that, but they're like, well, let's just let him, basically. What you have to watch out for, and it is happening in this country, is the small changes. first on the judiciary system and then on the education. Like, it's institutional changes. So this person rises through power and then people don't like it, but then, they also they don't become vigilante about all the changes. And then they change the institutions, and if I look at President Erdogan, who is in my opinion, is an authoritarian leader right now, right? Who has tens of thousands of academics and professors and journalists and anybody with an opinion in prisons right now, right? And so the way he rose to power is through that election, change the police system, change the military system, change the judicial system, change the court system, and suddenly change the constitution. And suddenly it's supposed to be one term, now second term, now he is forever, and then like you change it. And that's the danger in here. And it's happening
and
in
Trump
America.
Joked a few days ago that he could be here for 5 terms. He said it as a joke.
Yeah, and I don't think you should look at it as a joke, because I've seen enough leaders say, no, we are here, all of that, and they change the constitution because they change everything around. Trump is changing this. Regardless of your politics, Trump is changing the judicial system with all the changes in the laws that are happening right now with abortion, all of that. Look at it like the way, as a feminist, the way I look at it, it's like, don't look at women's issues as just a women's issue. Women are the canary in the line mine. They're the lowest hanging fruits. Usually politicians, what they do is start changes with women because they think no one will care, and then they move their way up, basically. It's just the minority is the vulnerable group. So we need to look. I don't care what your opinion is, whether you are pro-life or against life, whatever it is, or pro-choice, not against life, pro-choice. You need to look at these judicial laws that are changing on abortion across the country, basically, as a very, very dangerous phenomena, because it starts with women, is going to go to something else.
It's an attack on freedom.
And it attacks freedom not only of women. What I'm saying is it's only right now you may think it's only attacking women's freedom, but I'm saying that actually it's going to attack freedom in general, everyone's freedom. It's just the first course of action. So he is doing the same thing. Now, what I'm also worried about in here is, how do we fight back? And how do we fight back, where, in my opinion, I have anger in me, right? I mean, like, I'm also in relationship with anger.
This show is about recognizing that anger and sharing that anger.
It scares people sometimes.
But it's okay because that's part of what I think has to be said. It has to be named. It's okay to be angry. You should be angry. There is reason to be angry. What you choose to do with that anger is your choice, right? And that's where I want this show to be, and this discussion to be something that channels it into something positive. Because similarly, Trump has taken that anger and he's taken his take on patriotism and he's channeling it, in my view, into a very dangerous place. And I know that, and it's also, to your earlier point, what, America sets the tone for the world, at least for now, right? For better or worse, and what we do reverberates. So it's not just Trump, it's also Hungary, and it's now India with Modi. You see this cascading effect where it's easier to do things if you're not alone. So Trump can align with other people in other countries who are slowly nibbling away at freedoms as well. And it becomes more and more acceptable, more and more commonplace, especially in the West now. Things that would have been unthinkable 5-10 years ago in most Western countries, from Turkey to California, are now shifting. So all that is to say, your anger is welcomed here and appreciated here because you're paying attention. And I think your voice, especially on the show, I wanted to bring in your voice for people who might not be paying attention as closely as you are, but also with your perspective and your history and your vantage point. And then you took the words out of my mouth, actually. I mean, what is the song? You took the words out of my mouth. I know who said that. You sing on the show. That would be new. You'll be the first person to sing on the show, but hopefully not the last.
But basically, so that's the other thing that I'm worried about, is how people are resisting and how are they expressing the anger. So it's we should all be angry because it is worrisome what's happening. Then, like if I use Turkey as an example, 13 years ago, they actually used to have diversity of press and media and all of that. Now, 99.9% of the media is controlled by the government. Imagine this happens in America. It could happen in America, right? So this is because it's moving in that. That's what he's threatening, basically, right? So, but what I'm worried about also is how we are fighting it back. And when we fight it only with anger. So for me, anger is like a match. You should use it to match the fire, to light the fire, basically. But if you then keep on the match with the fire, like you keep on adding to the fire,
Right.
it could overconsume you.
Right, absolutely.
And so for me, what I'm worried about is how do we fight out of, like, not only like use anger to ignite, but then don't lead with it, because
Right.
then you become like him.
Right, that's right.
You know, you
That's right.
become like what you are fighting against.
Right,
So
right.
what we have, I call like the silent majority is how do
Yeah.
you fight, but with integrity and not
Right.
out of a point of
And
anger.
how do you do that? Because you've got,
It's
you know,
a
you're also
struggle.
a strategist and you're a tactician. You've built organizations. You've gotten things done. There are plenty of people in the activist world and the political world that just talk shit and don't actually get things done, and plenty of people who can, you know, say beautiful words and motivate people, but you know how to execute, right? You know how to take it through.
So do you.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah.
why I really feel a kinship with you, is because, you know, ideas on some level, especially now, I think are easy. Execution is hard.
Yeah.
Like, actually, there's a difference between ideas and vision. Ideas are like popcorn.
Yeah.
Vision is actually seeing it all the way through and knowing how to get there and finding the way to pull people together to get to that place that we want to get to. I mean, the original angry Americans were the revolutionaries in this country. George Washington was an angry American. The civil rights leaders were angry Americans, and they put it into a right place. But you have been such a powerful voice in channeling the motivations of people
Thank
around
you.
the world. So I ask you a
Thank you.
very, you know, tactical question. What do you advise people do with their anger?
Well, what do they do with their anger is activated, right? So
Yeah.
go and get engaged in whatever way you get engaged. But let me give you an example of when I learned. So when I was 23 years old, I learned about the war in Bosnia. No one remembers that war, you know, but it was the genocide of that
Bosnians
time,
remember, yeah.
right? There were concentration camps and rape camps and all of that, and it was the beginning of my activism. And there were demonstrations, so I would go to the demonstration, you know, all these things. And the first demonstration, I go and I took the bullhorn and I chanted and all of that. Second demonstrations was like a silent demonstration, so you have to always walk in Zen. And I was like, oh, fire! Like there's a genocide happening
Right.
there. Like what we're talking about, you know. And the third demonstration, I tried to take the bullhorn again, and then I was like, what? Okay, you're demonstrating over and over again. The people in Bosnia are not they need to be helped today, you know. So one is demonstrate it helps, but actually we need to engage and do something. So not just talk about what's going on in bad. What do we do right now for people in front of us, you know, in our communities, in our engagement? So just to give you an example, and I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, answering it about it in a rounded way. Since the election, I decided I'm going to go out of my way to actually engage and become friends with people I do not agree with. Whoever the other is.
Sure.
And because I need to stretch my own muscles and I need to engage and I need to learn in the relationships, how do I engage in a more productive way? And when I did that, I actually learned that I lost a lot of friendships and love, and because I'm so angry at their opinion. And then eventually I needed to confront myself of how do I engage differently, right? So we talk up, you know, so engage.
But you're
you know?
seeking to understand, not to convince.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember honestly I was in a discussion with a friend of mine from England, and he voted for Brexit. And so I heard Brexiter and fire came out of my eyes. You know, I was
Right.
like, you're a racist.
Right.
And this guy, I went out with him. I mean, I went not out with him. I went to college with him, you know. And I just saw him shut down.
Right. The wall
The
goes
wall
up.
just
Yeah.
And I remember in that moment I was like, what did I just do? I called him a racist, and I lost him. I lost the engagement.
You lost the trust.
I
too.
labeled him.
Yeah.
Why does he have any incentive interest now in engaging with me and talking and exploring a way, you know, a path forward, you know, on this issue, not on our friendship? So I vowed that I will not call people that, actually. I will not call people racist or bigot or sexist or all of these things. I want to engage and understand differently.
Frankly, even if they are.
Even if they are, like, as a
now, not to say
Muslim-
that guy is racist because he
Paul.
supports Brexit, but you meet people all the time who are racist, who are, you know, Islamophobic, who are...
Yeah, as a Muslim
Yeah.
and as a woman, I mean, I get a lot of
Yeah.
shit out of that,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
I mean, the things are, and it is, I still want to engage, I want to engage, but by labeling them, I shut the door, basically. I need to I changed my way. I just okay, so you're saying this. As a Muslim, you get a lot of shit said on you, right? And I just okay, so you're afraid. So this is what's happening. And then I acknowledge their fear.
Right.
And then when I acknowledge aspects of what they are saying, they can actually hear me, basically, and then engage. So I did change my strategy of engagement. One, I actually became much more, I go out of my way to be in relationship with people who are not in my comfort zone.
Right.
Not easy, whoever it is.
Right.
But I'm doing it. And it's a struggle, and I'm challenged by it all the time. Second, is say my truth, even though my truth is not popular. Sometimes, let's take Muslims as a general, because we are getting attacked as Islamophobia. And as a Muslim, I also think that there is an issue right now with not the existential aspect of the religion. It's like all religion, it is what it is, but it's how some Muslims are becoming destructive about it, right?
Sure.
So, the whole idea of being what you see from a lot of Muslims, we are standing for peace and that's what the Islam is and all of these things. And I was so it's only defensive strategy. It's very controversial to say, yes, Islam stands for this and this and this, but there's also this and this and this.
Right.
And yes, there are lots of Muslims who are peaceful, and there are some Muslims who are not peaceful. And that's every time I'm public about it, I get attacked, from it. So the lesson in here, you can't satisfy people. You cannot measure your success by how many likes you have on all the social media. And I'm not joking, because we are measured that way these days. For me, I measure is, am I saying my truth? And there are times in which I betray my truth and not say it so I can be liked. And honestly, I feel like a bitter taste in my mouth, like I betrayed myself.
Yeah.
So saying your truth may not be popular.
But be thoughtful about how you say your truth and know the repercussions or know the impact.
And it may be lonely. And it may be lonely.
But this is also kind of like a basic instructional from Zainab in conflict resolution. I mean, you do this at a very high diplomatic level and in the national media, but this can be with your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving, right? Or if folks are on the road this summer and they're traveling and you're traveling to a different part of the country or a different part of the world, and you confront a situation that is difficult. Right? This is what people need in America, though, on some levels, is a way to break down the hard parts and to find ways to deal with each other and work together. And so do you see, you go back to that core of America, as a Muslim woman living in America, are you hopeful for the future in this environment? Or, how do you feel about that? Right? You were here before 9/11, around 9/11, now after 9/11, and on a very basic level, I think part of what I want to acknowledge is that there is an unfair burden put on you not only to defend your position, but to explain it along the way, right? You not only have to defend or assert your political position or your policy position, you've usually got to educate whoever you're talking to about the very basics of Islam.
You're very kind.
Right? But it's true, right? Because the baseline knowledge level, and it's expanded in the country in the last few years, it was very low and still is very low, right? I mean, so you kind of have to have two prongs at the same time. As an activist, that's a very tricky tightrope to walk.
And I also don't only talk about Islam. I talk about women's rights, and I talk about all kinds of issues. So, but it's one example it's like sort of low-hanging fruits of an example. But listen, as who I am, right? A feminist, activist, immigrant, Muslim, woman of color, I really want, when I see Trump supporters, not all Trump supporters, but I am interested in understanding them. So rather than judge, you did this, I actually want to understand where is that coming from? Where is your fear? Where is all of these things? And, our friend George, from People's First, I love that man. And he's when he do canvassing in Ohio and different towns and all of that, he says 1/3 of people are gone, there's no conversation.
Right.
But 2/3, there are conversations going, and it's just, you have to distinguish between the rhetorics they repeat and between what they really want and they believe. And so what I'm saying is we need to engage. Am I worried for America right now? Yes. And it's not only because of Trump, because how we are fighting it, we have to be careful. Like we don't lose we don't lose our own integrity in the fight, basically. You know,
we don't burn the village to save it.
Exactly. So am I worried? Do I feel like anger is leading right now? And at one point, do I sometimes feel like both sides are becoming reflection of each other in that anger? And then you did this, no, you did this, no, you did this. It's like I feel like I'm a neighbor listening to a couple who have been married for a long time fighting with each other, and I'm like, you know. And so am I worried? Yes. Am I worried we're gonna lose a fight of you know, we need to go back to center of what's important? I think so, you know, because sometimes, and Paul, I'm not saying it because I could be coaching this. I'm saying because it's a trial and error for me. Like, you know, I do get upset at people who say horrible things, and I'm like, and then I'm like, okay, no, I have to come back, you know. So it's not I'm a Zen and not at all. It's just I'm like trying, and
you are operating at a very high level.
I don't know.
Very high stakes. You know, I mean, there are, you know, a handful of people in America who are Muslims in the media, right? And then there's an even smaller number that are women, right? Like single digits, who are on Morning Joe, who are on BBC, you are in a you are like a point guard in the NBA. It's a very rare air. You know, you're an all-star point guard in the NBA. It's a very high
kind of you.
No, but it's true, and the importance is similar. I mean, there are so many people relying on you. That's an incredible burden. But you're also a great translator and a great ambassador and a great friend. You're very dynamic in moving through social circles. You know people in fashion. You know people in entertainment. You know people in diplomacy. So can you talk about kind of the weirdness of that? Because there's also kind of a celebrity culture that involves presidents and other people that you're talking to Oprah, and then you go down into a war zone. So what's that like for you? And I have to ask you along the way too, as we think about where you came from and what was your first car? I have to ask you this because we got very intense here, and I don't want to miss the car question.
We're missing the fun part.
I know, but it's also very important. But the two questions: one, how do you operate? You know, how do you think about, or do you think about operating in those worlds when you're sitting in a chair, right? Do you think about the fact that you might be the only Muslim woman that many people have ever heard on television? Do you think about that?
No. Honestly, I don't. And this is, you know, all what I think is I'm comfortable in my skin, and that's the only credit I give myself, right? And so, and that helps me. That helps me go up and down the ladder and be with the wretched of the earth, you know, and love them, and then be with the biggest people on the earth and still love them, you know, and also love them, right? So, but that has nothing to do with them. It has to do with me just being comfortable with who I am, and I'm somewhere in the middle, you know, have in my own small apartment you've been to, you know, that you just like that's my you know, safety, and it's normal and nothing about it, right? Nothing special about it whatsoever, right? But it's a reflection. I'm special. I mean, I'm comfortable with myself. Second, what I hold myself responsible not for everybody. I don't feel like I'm representing people. I hold myself responsible. Am I telling my truth?
Right.
And that this is like my indicator. You know, am I telling my truth? There was one time only, I have to say, in which I got calls before I was going on some show, and people's like, if you say this, you'll piss off those people, and if you say this, and I got nervous, and I tried to be moderate, and I regret it to the bones. You know, it's like what's the point? What I'm trying to please those people or those people? We need to stay in integrity. And so the next time I went on the same subject, I said my truth, and
you let it fly.
I let it fly, and actually I did piss off people, you know, and they called me and emailed me, and then at the same time people called me. I was like, thank God you said that. And every time I tell my truth, it works actually. A lot of people say, oh my God, thank God you said that.
There are also children watching, right? There's a young Muslim girl somewhere in Chicago or in Alabama or wherever that's looking for someone to speak for them, someone to help translate their truth, right? And to represent a broader truth. And that's part of why I really felt this conversation was so important, because even if you don't recognize it, or it's part of your strategy is not to recognize, there's a very almost unfair leadership burden on you, Like the leadership
No,
burden
I
that
don't
you have
feel-
right
I don't
now at this
think it,
moment in
and
time.
I don't feel it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's good that I think if you feel it, then it becomes a burden
Yeah,
and
yeah.
scary. All of that.
Yeah.
I'm just like me, and like not feeling it, and I'm just like woohoo la la, yeah, you know. And my first car.
Yes, please. Thank you.
So I escaped from that. I wrote a memoir, and
Uh-huh.
I changed people's names in the memoir. And
Okay.
my revenge of my first ex-husband was by calling, and this is the only revenge I did. Of
Yes.
course, by A, telling the story,
Yes.
and then B, calling him in Arabic, so you wouldn't know when I'm calling him, shit trap.
Shit
You
trap.
know, so that was my revenge. It's like very benign, you know, but you
How do
know.
you say shit trap in Arabic?
Fakhri.
Fakhri. My Arabic is very bad. But that,
No, but
that-
it could be, it's a name of a person. It could be
Yeah.
a pride or fakhri, you know, shit
Fakhri.
trap, right? So that is my revenge. But what am I saying? My first, so I
first
go,
car.
escape, I get a job at a Hallmark.
At a Hallmark card
at a
store.
Hallmark
In
card
Chicago?
store in Chicago, an Italian family, which I love. Joe's Hallmark, you know.
Joe's Hallmark.
I love the family. Like they took care, and you would appreciate it was the first Gulf War, right? So I'm stacking up cards, Hallmark cards about love and I'm sobbing because my country is in a war. Like, you know, I'm like literally crying, and I'm just putting
you're in
love
Joe's
love
Hallmark,
cards, you
putting
know.
birthday
and,
cards on
you
the-
know, and my first Christmas was in Joe's Hallmark, and I see all these parents with their kids, and I was like, and I felt so lonely, and I was like, my family is not there, all of these things. So anyway, I save up my, you know, salary,
Yeah.
and I buy a very old 1970 brown and beige. What's an Chrysler? Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Very, very old, basically.
Wow.
And it's like
1970 brown Chrysler.
Exactly. No, two colors.
Two
You know
colors.
when they,
Two-tone.
yeah, no,
Yes.
two tones, right?
Yes.
And then like it takes me a long time. You know, that's the car I bought with my money, and I love that car. The car beforehand.
Hold on, I want to stay on that car.
Yeah.
Because so that is an amazing story.
Yeah.
Like you saved your money working at Joe's Hallmark
Yeah.
in Chicago, and the first car you buy is a Chrysler. Did you intentionally buy an American car?
No,
Or
I
you
just had
that was-
$600, and that's all what I could afford. But I have to tell you, was the first
Please,
car I
please,
owned
say-
in my life, which was
next
not
car.
from my money.
Yes.
So when you think what's your first car you own, I think the one I bought, $600 in my own money.
Please tell me
The
Oprah
first
gave you a car.
No,
okay.
the Oprah was not in the picture. But first car I owned was in my name, was a gift from Saddam Hussein.
Wow.
A Mitsubishi, a pistachio color Mitsubishi that was the only car of its kind and its color in Iraq. And it was his gift for me
This was in Baghdad.
in Baghdad. So
And you were
I
how
drove
old?
it. I was like, 18, 19 or whatever,
Wow.
and 18. And I drove it, and the whole city knew.
Wow. It was the only car of its
Oh
kind
my
in the
God.
entire country.
Yeah, and the only color of the color of
Did you
pistachio.
drive it, or were you driven in it?
No. This was his gift from me, so I drove it.
Wow.
Because I got my license, whatever.
Yeah,
So long story,
yeah.
and everyone knew it was like so. So I moved from the only car in the country, given by the president, to
To a beat up Chrysler in Chicago.
Chrysler insurance, $600. And I like pray every time that it's. And I love that car, the one I bought with my own money. With that $600 for me, it like makes me laugh and smile and shine. And the Mitsubishi makes me like, oh yeah.
This is why we asked the car question. Because we
There you
never
go.
know where it's
Yeah.
going to go.
Yeah. So
And
which
that-
car you want? The one I owned in my name or the one I bought with my money?
I'm just grateful for both stories. And I know anyone listening right now is grateful for both stories. So I want to ask you what you think of the political landscape, right? The folks are running for president, and you, I hope, are getting calls from these people to seek your counsel, or at least
Not really.
Okay, well that's a shame because they should. But when you look at these candidates, what are your thoughts? Because there's so many now, and I know you think in terms as an activist, right? Is there someone that you think is more promising or more effective or more whatever? I just would love to hear your assessment of the landscape of all these candidates.
I have to tell you, Paul, you caught me because I ask my guests that in my show all the time,
Yes.
and I've never put a thought in my answer. I was like, shit. I mean, in the opposite chair in here. I'm watching all.
Yeah.
Like I actually cannot name someone who I would say this
Yeah.
is what's
And
most
you've met
exciting
many
me.
of them?
No, not necessarily actually. I
Okay.
really have not. I've been watching on the margin in here. I know people who are in different campaigns, but I've never actually. I don't think I met anybody, as a matter of fact. And so I met Cory Booker, and I actually I'm just watching, and everyone has the pros and the cons and all of these things, and I'm just watching. I can tell you I shouldn't tell who I don't like, I guess,
I will leave it up to you to tell your truth, Zainab, as you see fit.
Well, I mean, for me is we have to be strategic, and there is the activist part of me, and there's a strategic part of me, and and we can't just be, for me, like, for example, Bernie Sanders, when he says all the slogans that some of them I really do like, but then there's a practical part of me, that practical that you would understand, who not only have an idea, but build an organization and have to fundraise and have to make it practical and work and like all of these things. So there's an ideologue out of me, an ideological person, and there's also a very practical person. And the way I try to do it is try to see how I can fit both of them in the same box, right? So when I hear just slogans, I don't get excited. I become like, well, where's the practical side here, mister? Right. Okay, this is really good. I like this language, but I need you to see like more implementation and think through it, So that's what I'm trying to say. So I don't get necessarily bought in by a lot of the fancy talks,
Yeah.
I really want to see grounded, earthy, come back to this earth. We really need to, really need to bring this country back together. It's important for me personally, not only for the country, but for the world. This has to be the anchor, And so I'm watching everyone. And then also who can be grasp enough to like fight Donald Trump, to be honest, because he brings a nasty part of an individual in a fight. So I don't know who could be that, who can do that, and yet who can do that while staying in integrity. And I'm obviously excited about all the women. All of them.
Yeah.
And I do think it's a beautiful story, no matter who end up winning, that Hillary would pave the path forward, and she took a bullet for it, basically, and then after her, it's a beautiful, from a story perspective, so many women rise and say, we are gonna do it again. And so from a feminist perspective, that's a good story. I mean, I know she took a bullet for it, but like also it's not a lost story. There are more women rising, and that's exciting for me,
Do you, when you think back to now, especially given your intimacy with Saddam, there was a moment in Iraq where there was many people who felt, Iraqis who felt like there must be accountability, and there must be public accountability, to the point where an execution took place, right? It felt like that was necessary for Iraq, from at least in my experience on some levels, to say to the world, like, we took some control here. We tried to, it may not be the justice that you want, but it is the justice that we administered, and we are on some levels taking care of our situation. When you look at Trump, and now there's conversations about impeachment, do you feel like the American people have to send a message to the world on some levels that there is accountability? If he just walks like Wolfowitz and like Rumsfeld and like so many others that have, in my view, had a hugely destructive impact on this country and on our world standing and on other countries, does there need to be some level of accountability? Maybe it's impeachment. Some people would love to see him in jail, right? But do you feel like that is necessary for America to turn the page, and do you feel like that is necessary for the world to take us seriously?
So a couple of things. One, I want to go back to the Iraq part, because I was against the way Saddam execution went about. As in, I thought every country needs to have its own truth and reconciliation and justice, basically. So his court, his trial, how Iraqis went about it and tried him and all of that was to set an example of justice. If you give the worst criminal due diligence and due process in justice, then the smallest criminal can also get that.
Right.
You set the bar high with the worst criminal, and that is Saddam, right? And so in his case, they did one trial out of 6 trials, and they executed him on only that one trial. And I cried the day he died. And I still get emotional. And I cried for the country, because I said, oh my God, this was our chance to actually have a just process.
Right.
And we just threw it out in the
It wasn't
end.
like a war crimes tribunal. It felt like it was messy.
It was messy and it's ugly and it didn't finish.
Right.
Like, finish the trial, what he did to Kurds, what he did to Shia, what he did to Kushites, what he did to this, like, do it so the country has come to the same book of our narrative and our history. And when they cut it short and executed him, they cut not his life short. I don't care about that. They cut the process short and they cut the narration short. And now Iraq, as a result, and it's fascinating. Our friendship is fascinating for me, right? Because you're a soldier, in the army, in the U.S. Army, and and I love you, and we're in friendship and a genuine good friendship, right? And which is also talk about my own process of how do you actually try to understand the other. Like, I don't see you as a soldier. I just whereas I want to understand. And then you see the human and you become friends, right? So I really was pissed off. And then I have to admit, only to finish the thought on Saddam, the part of me, and this is the controversial part, is I knew him as uncle. I knew him. I just refer to him as uncle. He's not my blood uncle. It's just my father's friend, right? So I cried for the country, and I cried because I know this man, and I just saw him executed. And I would lie to you if I just said, the heck of him. I mean, I knew him as uncle, and I knew him as a dictator, and I hate him as a dictator, and I have feelings for him as an uncle. And they both these feelings coexist with each other. So that's neither there or here, but to talk about the trial of Saddam, it was not. How America does and what it do in a just, it's what's important is it has to be just, fair, and legal way of doing it. Because then it is about American values and it's about democratic values and about freedom values. So how we deal with Trump, whether it is impeachment, whether it is election loss or not, has to be a way that demonstrates the values of democracy. Does that mean, so what does that mean? I actually, I don't know, but it has to, because that's when the world.
Election, or it could be, there are plenty of people who want to see him taken away in handcuffs, right?
And I really don't know. And I try to follow the news.
In between, or maybe it's re-election, right?
And maybe it's impeachment. And maybe it is impeachment. Whatever it is, how America deals, and what I'm trying to say, in this moment of history, and it's a pivotal moment of history, it's a divided moment of history, it's a populist moment of history, how America deals with it. Learn the lessons from Iraq. You either win the values, it's a long run win. And that's when the whole world will watch, watching. Or it will lose its values and the loss is big for the world. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it's a pivotal moment. We have to watch it.
This is why I wanted you on this show at this moment in time. And I want you to also, as we kind of take a breath, right? Because that's a lot to process, right? I'm going to have to pause that and go back and listen to it a couple times to just process a lot of. That was very, very, very moving what you shared. And your perspective and insight is very, very valuable, and I'm thankful for that. But knowing what you do about conflict and about hardship and about pain, there are folks listening to this show who might be going through a tough time in their life, or maybe going through adversity. What is something that makes you happy? Because you are also one of the most joyous and inspiring people I know. Zainab, what makes you happy?
Here's the thing. If there's such a thing as dying in a lifetime, dying while being alive, I have died while being alive a couple of times in my life. And not because of disease or illness. I have died.
Right.
You lose hope and you lose them. And I remember these moments very clearly. They happened twice in my life, and you go to despair, basically. And you just and then you wake up the next day, and little by little you put one feet on top of the other, in front of the other feet, in front of the other feet. And like the last time this happened to me was actually 4 years ago, and I really like the taste of life like left me, right? And here I am, and like I am in a good, thank God, joyous moment, right? And that's when the joyous, happy moment. But it's not coming out of lack of experiencing the sad moment, or the painful moment or whatever. It's coming because I have experienced that deep down bottom moment. And so now what keeps me happy, honestly, it's like so silly, but it is so real. So I wake up in the morning, every morning, and because I remember that moment. It's and before that it was 20 years ago that it happened to me. Like that deepest moment. And then you go, of course, I mean, sometimes happens on a weekly level or monthly level or a yearly level, but you go to that moment, right? I don't know if, for me it go. So then I wake up, and what gives me, and I was like, thank you, God. And I put my feet on my floor. I was like, wow, thank you, God. And I have my healthy food. I was like, whoa, thank you, God. And I love my apartment. I was like, thank you. And nothing is special about these things. Honestly, nothing is special. But it's just like, and yesterday I was like complaining, I was like, I'm so tired. I'm working so hard and all of that. I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, you're like, blessed to have all these things to do, and you want to do all of these things. So I just shifted from complaining and despair in a moment to say, let's just be grateful. Oh, my feet was hurting me. That's what it was, because women, you wear high heels.
But you're also
and
wearing cowboy boots
because
right now.
it's like flat and easy, right?
You walked in, you look like a rock star. You have cowboy boots on and these killer bracelet, like a Wonder Woman bracelet, and very, very fitting, because you are a superhero. And this necklace.
Well, the cowboy is from a vintage store for like $10.
You are a fashion innovator. Fashion makes you happy.
Thank you. Yes, it makes it.
Right?
So so what I'm saying is gratitude makes me happy, and then everything about it makes me happy. Then when I eat delicious food, I become like so overexcited, and when I find it like a $10 cowboy boots, I get overexcited, and when it's really sunny, I get overexcited. So there's nothing magical. It's like life makes me happy, and it's because I had the other aspect of it where it didn't make me happy. So now I'm like, woohoo! It's a sunny day.
It's that perspective is a gift, right? It's the silver lining of that hardship. And I think
we can
anybody
all do
who's
it.
been through severe trauma or any level of pain, I think, could probably relate to that. And it's a good perspective to think about in dark times, how you can always find light somewhere. I think my father said that to me in some way when I left for Iraq. He knew I was going to war, and he said something like, you can find things every day.
And how did it work?
Something.
I mean,
it's just you have to look for it. My grandfather came here and spent 3 years in the South Pacific. It was very hard. He never talked about it, except that he one day he saw Dom DiMaggio, not even Joe DiMaggio, but Dom DiMaggio, Joe DiMaggio's brother. He saw him one day in the Philippines. That was kind of all he talked about. He didn't really talk about the hard times, and I know there were hard times, but he taught me to pay attention. And that's what I teach my boys, is to pay attention. Because if you just open your eyes and look around, you can see the sunshine, or you can appreciate your breath, or you can taste the water, and just appreciate what you do have. And when you've had nothing or very close to nothing, then you realize how sacred the something is.
Absolutely.
And that's a gift that my grandfather gave me, and I think my father built on, and I think you have given us today by just having that appreciation.
And I have to tell you, and for me, I call it watching for the signs. I have a story to tell you. We have a friend in common. David Chastain. I don't know if
Really?
Oh my gosh! So when the Iraq War happens, right? They go for this is a story.
No, I'm laughing because I don't know if we can. So can we talk about what he used to do?
No, I mean no. He used to be in the war, right?
Yeah,
I don't.
Yeah.
I only
yeah,
know
and then he was
also
in a specialized area of our government at another point later in his life.
Okay,
Yes.
I don't know about that. I know the story
Yes.
I have with David, right?
Yes.
Which
Okay.
is the war happens. 2 weeks later, a small plane of civilians go into Iraq, basically, 6 of us, mostly Europeans. I'm the only one American and Iraqi. And a plane from Jordan made in 1969, the year I was born. And so we land into Baghdad International Airport, right? My father was the head of the Iraqi civil aviation. So I grew up in the airport and I was like the queen of the,
BIAP, we called it BIAP later.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we land. And I see all these destroyed planes, tanks, destroyed air, and like my heart just shrinks, and I'm scared. I'm like
rolling into the airport, yeah.
Right, and so I'm scared, and I'm like, oh my God, like this is if they know who I was, like who I am, like my father was the king of this airport, and I'm like scared, and I was like, oh, U.S. soldiers all over, and this guy is like he's creating his own system, right? He's like, what's your name, your nationality, give me your passport number. He's like making his own system on a paper, basically.
Right,
There's no system,
That's how everything worked over there.
And so I am like nervous, scared, and I was like, he said, who works with Women for Women International? And I'm like, I am, but I can just go back to this plane and go back to Jordan. Don't worry, you did not see me here. I'll just go back to Jordan. Don't worry. Yeah. And he spread his arms, and he says, "Welcome to this country. This country needs you." And he doesn't know my own background. It was David.
Wow.
He only knows Women for Women International, and him and his wife had donated money to it because it helps women survivors of wars. But what I'm trying to tell you is, here I am going back to my own destroyed country, in the war, and meeting soldiers, and I'm always scared of soldiers. Like, no, I'm not, but like, and because I read enough books about, my favorite book is The Good Soldier, actually, and like it shows you the humanity, like individuals, humanity, right? And so, and I just like looked at it, and I looked up, and it's like, okay, God, okay, I'm okay. So you watch the signs, and the signs turns what was in my moment very sad moment into actually a moment of like saying, stay, work, try to create peace.
I'm glad it was him, because he's one of the best people I know.
Wow.
And he's always considered himself a follower of God. He was very religious for many parts of his life. I think he may have even studied in seminary at some point. And I know him because we met in 2004, and he was one of the very first members of what became IAVA. He's one of the plank owners. Like when it was Operation Truth in 2004, and he was, he was a disgruntled Republican who couldn't find his home with Kerry or anywhere else, and he was a chemical weapons officer. And he always tells the story about when they got to Iraq, there was the plan. There was the plan to get to Iraq, and when they got to Iraq, he asked, "Where is the plan for what's next?" And they said there isn't any. There was no page in the book for what happened next, and now we all know what happened next. But that's maybe a beautiful way to bring it back around, because the friendship that I think can come out of war can be that light, and our friendship is that.
Absolutely.
And I also have gifts that I have for every guest.
All
I also,
right.
while I give you these gifts, I want you to remember that before we got here, you told me my podcast was too long. But we've been talking, and this is why the podcast is long, because you can only get to those real stories if we have the time, right?
It is so true, and I always complain, as like someone have my own show, I always complain about the edits we have to do and cuts we have to do, and why do we have to cut this person, and they're so interesting.
And this is a quarter of what dinner is like at your house, because we usually talk for 3 more hours,
That's
and
so
there's 3 bottles of wine.
Exactly.
But I have gifts for you that I give for every guest, and they're kind of, yes, please. I'm just going to ask you to hold the mic up. Or I'll hold the mic for you.
I'll hold it like this.
Okay, there you go. Now, in the bag, we've got a couple things. First of all is whiskey. Now, we always have an American whiskey every episode.
Wow.
And so I will spare.
Love
I will not have an exception.
Oh, my God. I remember your wife brought, you guys brought some delicious drink when you came over
It was
at my
like
home.
a cognac or
yes,
something?
oh, my God.
Yeah,
it was
my
really
wife
fantastic.
is very good at selecting.
Fantastic. It's
selecting
fabulous.
Yes,
Thank
this is
you.
Old Forester Whisky, and it has a classic look to it that I thought was appropriate.
I love it.
For you. And then we've got a couple. This is just swag. This is a T-shirt, because you are a beautiful, wonderful, angry American, and it's an Angry Americans T-shirt. Made in America. You can get them online at angryamericans.us.
And it's really
made
good
by
fabric.
Veterans.
I love it.
Very
I love
cozy.
it. You know, I'm all into conscious consumerism, which is like I say we have to like ask who made it, how did we treat them, did they make it right, all of
Made
that.
by veterans in Chicago.
I love
They're from
it.
Chicago.
I love it.
They have a
truly.
headquarters just outside Chicago.
Fantastic.
And then there's one more thing in there because I can't wait to see your reaction to this. Every guest this season, I have presented them with, if maybe you had these at Joe's Hallmark when you were in Chicago, but they're Peeps. Now, Peeps, we have yellow, blue, and pink.
I love it.
And the question is, which...
And they're gluten-free.
And they are gluten-free, see? But if you had to pick one color, Zainab, with the blue, the pink, or the yellow, which would be your choice?
I think I will pick the blue.
Why?
Because blue for me is, first of all, I love it, and it's fat-free.
This is the beauty of Peeps. Gluten-free, fat-free.
I love it. It is fantastic. Can I eat one now?
You can eat them anytime you want, absolutely, with the whiskey or without.
Fantastic. I like blue. For some reason, blue for me is like when I think of I close my eyes and I think of freedom and joy and happiness, and all, I think of blue.
And now you will think of blue.
And then I
Peeps.
like the blue character in the X-Men.
Nightcrawler?
Yes.
Or Mystique?
No, Mystique.
Ah,
Mystique.
that's a good.
Yeah.
If you were,
I
if you were
love
an X-Men,
Mystique.
if you were an X-Men character, who would you be?
No, I
Would
wouldn't
you-
be Mystique. I just
No?
like the look of all
Yeah,
blue
well,
women.
Yeah,
you know?
that's good. If you were an X-Men character, who would you be?
I think I would want to be the professor.
I think that's appropriate. You definitely have the
Or Halle Berry with the lightning
Storm.
thing. Storm. Yes.
which is also a good one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
you are Storm,
Yeah.
and you are Dr. Xavier, and you are Mystique.
Oh.
And
Which one do you want to be?
Oh, man. I grew up all about Wolverine.
I love Wolverine.
I almost named
God.
when I was a kid, I swore that I was going to name my kid Logan.
Oh,
Just because
oh
Logan
my
was
gosh.
Wolverine's name, and I loved the backstory. I was just,
Yeah.
I was a Wolverine addict.
I love
everything that came
yeah,
up long before
yeah.
Wolverine was big and popular. When I was a kid, Wolverine was my dude. But then over time, I think now it's become Professor Xavier because I'm older now, right? And I'm bald, and you know, I hope to be as cerebral as he is, and as wise as he is.
I know. But it's also good to be in the fights.
That's true. But he was in the fight. He was above the
Yeah,
fight.
he was. Yes,
he was
yes.
everywhere.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
He
yeah.
was like a
yeah.
he was like
Yeah.
a strategic weapon rather than a
Oh
tactical
my God!
weapon,
I just
right?
had an epiphany, a major epiphany.
Okay.
Xavier
Yes.
is on a wheelchair.
Yes.
Game of Thrones,
Uh-huh.
who became
Bran the Broken.
on a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Both of them can be in the battle without being in the battle. Oh my God! I just had a huge
You got
epiphany.
it.
This is
You got it.
amazing,
We
right?
haven't gotten into Game of Thrones enough this season. Did you like the ending? Did you watch the ending?
I did watch the ending and I like it because I actually like the fact that the leader basically is on wheelchair.
Yeah.
And that so it's like the diversity,
Yeah.
you know, and I like the fact that he did not have he was okay to holding power but was not power hungry. So I like that aspect of it, you know.
Which is like you and what we need
Thank
from
you.
America.
You're too kind.
Listeners have to know that I am profoundly disappointed with the final season of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones,
I
until this
know.
season, was my favorite show of all time. It has now fallen.
I agree.
It has fallen from number one. It blew the lead in the fourth quarter, and now it has gone from number one to number three.
No,
Breaking Bad is back at number one for me.
Oh,
The
okay.
Wire is back at number two for me, and Game of Thrones has fallen 3 places on Rieckhoff's
The
best of
season
all
is
time.
bad. The season is bad. The ending, giving how bad the season, in my
The
opinion,
season
is
blew it.
decent.
You got to complete the
Yeah,
task. Like
yeah.
Breaking Bad, number one for me because it was totally complete. It was
Okay.
it was full
Yeah,
circle.
yeah.
It was thoughtful. I feel like the last season of Game of Thrones, they
Horrible.
were kind of winging it.
I totally-
It felt like the Iraq War. Like they didn't know where
Totally.
it was going to end.
I
And it kind of
agree.
ended like the Iraq War.
Exactly.
See? There we
I mean,
go.
like, no,
Where are we
the
going? What's
season
gonna
was
happen?
exactly.
Who the hell knows? Good luck,
but
everybody.
given how bad it is,
Yes.
it was a decent ending. But like, all they
Yes.
really wasted the season on battlefields, and like they did
See?
not need to do
It's-
that. They
well,
just really
and I
did
think
not need to do
in maybe a fitting way, the lights have gone out in our video. There will be video of this episode that you can find online. And you can find Zainab on Yahoo, your show. Would you mind telling
Through her
people?
eyes at
Please.
Yahoo News.
Yes.
And it's, so
And
just
you're a
go, and
regular
it's a
on Morning
podcast
Joe.
as well.
And you have a podcast.
Yeah.
And you have amazing books that people should also check out.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My latest is Freedom is an Inside Job, which is a lot of what I learned about like changing the world to realize I was like, oh shit, I have to change myself.
Yes.
And my memoir, of course, Between Two Worlds. And thank you so much, Paul. I sort of listen, and I'm trying to observe all the nice and compliments that you gave. But like what you did, I remember first time I met you in your office and you started the meeting with a prayer for love. And I was like, wow, because, I work in war and I did have issues with soldiers really. And it worked. It was a process for me to actually read and then meet and then be friends and then love,
Yes.
And it was like, it was like, wow, it's a soldier who's talking about love, and that's beautiful. And so you really model for me healthy masculinity in a time where masculinity is being challenged.
Thank you. My mother would be very happy to hear that.
So is your
My
wife,
mother
I
was
would
a
say.
feminist, my wife as well, but my mother worked very hard on.
Yeah.
She was trying to make me a feminist before people thought about making men feminists.
Fantastic.
My mother definitely deserves any credit, and then my
Fantastic.
wife, of course.
And then your leadership and honesty, and I really
thank you.
appreciate that,
Thank you.
Paul. Really,
Thank
really.
you. But
Thank
I am so grateful for your leadership and for joining us and for breaking it down. Like, this was a conversation where you really, you always keep it real and you're always very truthful. But I hope people now understand why I think you're one of the most important voices in the world. You really
You are
are.
too
And
kind.
especially
And
right
so
now.
are you.
And our country is so lucky that you ended up here. You
Clear
are
mirror,
what
clear mirror in
Clear
here.
mirror.
Clear mirror, right back at you, man. Right back.
I look
Seriously.
forward to examining the mirror analogy throughout the summer and for the next few years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, the brilliant and dynamic Zainab Salbi, thank you for joining us on Angry Americans.
Thank you.